We got that dynamite. We got that dynamite.
Find the perfect ride for you today with the New Year New Ride sales event at Guam Auto Spot. Get behind the wheel of the 2024 Outlander Sport starting at just $22,995 or only $156 per paycheck. Visit GuamAutospot.com or call 671-478-AUTO.
Find a plan that goes with your flow. Get unlimited local talk, text, and data at the most affordable rate with Unlimited Flow Postpaid, only at Docomo Pacific.
Try Wendy's deliciously indulgent mushroom bacon cheeseburger made with juicy beef, crispy applewood smoked bacon, savory roasted mushrooms, Munster cheese, and a creamy garlic spread, all in a soft toasted bun. Make it a combo and try it in a double or a triple. Wendy's, good, done right. Beat the heat and indulge in fruity cold smoothies at Cold Stone Creamery today. And if you're looking for a healthier alternative, they've got an acai bowl packed with fruits for a refreshing holiday from the hot sun and whatever is stressing you out. Take the family, treat your friends, or hog it all to yourself. Cold Stone Creamery, the ultimate ice cream experience.
Good Morning Show with Troy Torres is brought to you by 76 Circle K Guam.
Good afternoon. I know it's not the morning. I started this kind of late, but good afternoon, my dear friends. It is 12:17 p.m. on Tuesday, January 28, 2025. And you know what that means? It's Johnny Rosario's birthday. Happy birthday, my cello. I love you so much now and forever and all of eternity. And so many people love you. Thank you all for joining. Welcome, Debbie Kanata, Auntie Debbie. I love you so much. Welcome, Brad Rosala from NMI News Service. I'm very honored and proud to have you watching our show. Thank you so much, Brad. We love you too. Before I get started on legislation, and by the way, there is now legislation from the Commonwealth Legislature, so that will occupy the greater part of this show, going through this legislation in both the House and the Senate. But before I get to that, I wanted to talk about the Medical Malpractice Act here. And prior to that, like now, I want to talk about something that's gotten me all fired up. Like I'm ready to go. Over the weekend, I was triggered to begin to purge Kandit's followers. Basically, the fringe, the small fraction of people who are bigots, and who have no hope whatsoever of understanding that their ignorance has lent to bigotry in our islands and in the country. And what triggered it was because, you know, my rationale for keeping all of these people the past several years was twofold. One, their guy was not in power. They did not like Joe Biden. And so I thought, you know, as far as freedom of speech goes, right? I'm not, and you know, it's funny. It's funny when people talk about freedom of speech. They think they're somehow entitled to say whatever they want to say on our private platform. That's not how freedom of speech works, first of all. Secondly, because their guy wasn't in power, I thought these people especially have every right to their political speech, so long as they're not spewing racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, stuff like that, right? But even at that, something slipped through the crack. Like I can't police every single comment that comes in, especially on the more controversial stuff. that was one of the reasons that I kept those comments on. Another reason was, I'm not easily offended personally. And I wanted our audience, our greater audience, to see what some in the fringe, or what all of these people in the fringe say, because it's ludicrous. It's just crazy stuff. But then over the weekend, a friend told me, you have to consider more than just yourself and more than just your adult audience who are capable of making informed decisions on their own. True, and they should see things like that so that they can understand just how crazy some people in our country are. But what about the kids and the young adults who are watching? And that really struck me. And I had to think back I had to recall my days as a teenager and as a young boy, very fearful of coming out of the closet. Being immersed in a society that didn't necessarily accept, at the time, being gay. And so I try to put myself in the shoes of these younger kids, and I don't want them to see that stuff. I don't want young girls seeing comments that belittle women, that demean women. I don't want Chuki's children to see comments about how just because of the color of their skin and the race that they are, that for some of these commenters, that they're less of people deserving of less respect and humanity. And so, I have an absolute responsibility to purge these people from our list. And it has been so rewarding. So last night, before I went to bed, I posted this. Oh, you're going to love this. Yesterday was the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, the Auschwitz concentration camp. It's also called, January 27 is also called International Holocaust Remembrance Day. It signifies the day 80 years ago on January 27 when the Red Army reached Auschwitz and liberated the few survivors at that camp that had seen the murder of 1.1 million Jews, 100,000 Catholics, 19,000 gypsies, and an unknown fraction of the 15,000 total gay men who were murdered throughout all of the concentration camps. Some of them were in Auschwitz. And I didn't hear a peep about International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Underneath all of the madness that has been happening since the Trump administration started office, and more importantly, since those on the fringe right, the fascists, I'm just going to be blunt here, and I really, really don't care who's sensitive about it. Understanding that kids are watching, that young minds are watching, we have a duty to be truthful to them. All of this racist, sexist, misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic undertone emboldened by the start of this administration, we lost sight that yesterday was the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. Auschwitz, a name tainted by the evil of the Nazi regime in the last century. And I thought it was pretty timely, in the worst of ways, that this nearly coincides with the day that Elon Musk made the Nazi salute in front of, right behind a presidential seal. A high-ranking government agent and the richest man in the world. And so I posted this along with the short history of Auschwitz, at least about what happened to the numbers of the victims there. And there were people who commented with their reverence about this day, but most of the people coming out of the woodwork in the comments section of this one post didn't say a damn thing about Auschwitz. didn't say one single thing about the Holocaust or anti-Semitism or homophobia or racism. All they could say was this is fake news because all Elon Musk was doing was expressing that it was from his heart, because he did the tap on his heart and then he made that salute, which is exactly the Nazi salute. It is exactly the Nazi salute. But because after he made the salute, he said, and the context of this, and they keep these people on the alt-right, they keep saying things like, you got to do your research, or you're taking it out of context. The full context of that video is he made the salute, and then he said, it's from my heart. What, my dear idiots who actually believe that, do you think Adolf Hitler said in his speeches? Do you think he said, I am going to intern more than 6 million Jews in concentration camps and have them systematically murdered in the final solution to the Jewish question? Do you think that's what he said? No. You know what he said? Aus seinem Herzen. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's German, because what Adolf Hitler repeatedly said was, from my heart. And it just baffles me how stupid people can be. Some people who I thought were even smart, because their partisanship has blinded them so much that they cannot see fascism on the rise. They cannot see a pledge of allegiance to Nazism and not to America. They cannot see the undoing of democracy. They cannot see, will not see, refuse to open their eyes to the blatant and plain in sight racism, sexism, misogyny, the attacks on women and gays and trans, the attacks on the poor, on themselves, policies being implemented, policies being revoked, all of which leading to the rich getting richer and the poor being deprived of services, all leading to corporate welfare as welfare is dismantled. It's funny because a lot of these people, they think that I care whether they stay on this platform. So they say things like, I'm getting off here. Like, go, please. I've already purged, I've already blocked, I think 40 of these people. I looked at the numbers this morning. Our numbers dropped another 40, so 40 purged themselves. Good for you, good riddance. I will continue to purge because we don't need that. Because we don't need kids seeing that. We don't need young minds being indoctrinated, by that kind of vile, evil, disgusting behavior. Have your coffee. I just wanted to talk about that just briefly, as briefly as I could, and let you know that all of this has emboldened me to go even harder on this issue. And I really couldn't care less if you're offended by that. But I know those of you who share my sentiments, and maybe you don't share all of my sentiments. Maybe you don't agree with me on everything, and I would hope that you don't agree with me on everything, because I'm not a perfect person and I don't always get it right. And in order for us to have a more perfect conversation, we need to have disagreements and we need to talk it out. You know? And we need to be respectful of our disagreements and each other. But that's what this platform is supposed to be for. Not to promote bigotry, not to allow the bigots to overtake the conversation with their research from the University of YouTube and Breitbart and Joe Rogan. I'm emboldened, and I love it. So, good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining. The subtitle of this show is that what's glaringly missing from the list of legislation in the Guam legislature. There's 41 bills that have been introduced so far. There might be more, but the system is only reflecting what was introduced as of yesterday. So there might have been more legislation that was introduced either late yesterday or this morning. The phones to the clerk's office and the Committee on Rules are not working. I don't know what's going on there. So I don't have a way of getting that updated list unless I get my passport and go to Agana to the legislature to get physical copies or to put it on a thumb drive. And I'm not going to do that. We'll just wait for tomorrow for their whatever technical issues that they're having to be resolved. But in the meantime, and before I get to the list of the Commonwealth Legislature's new bills, I do want to talk about the fact that no legislator has introduced legislation to reform the Medical Malpractice Mandatory Arbitration Act, which is not just a priority issue. And I'm not saying that as like because I believe just because I believe it's a priority issue. It was also brought up in the last legislature and the legislature before that, and the senators talked about it as a priority issue. And also because several of the Republican senators did say that they would support some type of reform to the MMMAA. And we've talked about this in length before. This is something that we did a whole lot of reporting on, a whole lot of editorial interviews, just heartbreaking stuff about how here in Guam, there have been so many cases of alleged medical malpractice that unless you're a rich person, and I'm not talking about upper middle class, I'm talking about rich. I'm talking about you have the cash resources to invest tens of thousands to 6 digits in money so that you can pursue a medical malpractice case. The law right now makes it very difficult, nearly impossible. Even a federal court judge talked about how this law prevents people without means from pursuing justice. The Medical Malpractice Mandatory Arbitration Act makes it so that if you have a claim of medical malpractice, you have to go through an arbitration panel, and you have to bear the cost of all of this, not just your attorney's fees, but also the cost of the arbitration against the rich doctor who allegedly either killed your relative or maimed you. And this issue was made exclamatory by the October 31, 2018 death of Asher Dean Lebowski, a 5-year-old boy who was sick. His father took him to the SDA clinic, begged them to the point of them threatening to have him arrested, according to him, because he was begging them to provide better service to his son, who was clearly sick. He then took him to the hospital. He was admitted, and he died. He died in his father's arms. It was early morning, October 31, 2018. A CMS report confirmed that there was mismanagement in Asher Dean's case, that boy might have survived if standards of care were provided, or if care was provided up to standard over at GMH. GMH ended up having to settle with Asher Dean's father, David Lebowski. GMH didn't want the CMS report to get out. When it came out, we broke the story. When it finally came out, understandably, they couldn't talk about it because of litigation, right? But we haven't had much transparency from GMH on this matter, or for that matter, on the other claims of medical malpractice, because there are many. And the fear from all of us should be, what about when it's our turn to go to the hospital? What about when it's our turn to see the doctor for something? How are we assured that there is a mechanism of a real mechanism of accountability in place so that standards are adhered to? And the doctors, in fighting a bill by Therese Terlahi in the last term, the last term or the term before that, I can't remember, because Therese Terlahi introduced a medical malpractice mandatory arbitration bill, reform bill, and many doctors came out against it. To be fair, though, some of the doctors did say that they were willing to accept reform if there were amendments made to that bill. I don't know if amendments were ever made to that bill, but I believe Senator Tina Munya Barnes introduced a bill. I'm not sure if someone else introduced a bill in the last legislature, but all of it went nowhere. And now you have a new crop of senators, a new majority in the Guam legislature. You have several senators who have committed to supporting some type of medical malpractice mandatory arbitration act reform. But at least in the first 41 bills of the legislature that have been introduced, none of them speak to that. And so I'm wondering whether Therese Terlahi will be reintroducing her bill, maybe with those amendments that some of those doctors wanted, or if one of the Republicans will introduce a bill like that, or if some sort of task force, legislative task force, is going to be put together to go over, the putting together of legislation that might not be agreeable to everyone, but might be agreeable just enough to get some type of reform passed to expand access to this method of accountability, so that we can be more assured that the next time we go to the doctor, we won't be neglected, or something bad won't happen because of malpractice. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. Ben Pangilinan says, there are those who are just not open-minded, don't see what's in front of them. We are going to get worse before it gets better. That's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate truth, Ben. I think about, these 4 years that we're up against, and the S show that it already has been in just less than 2 weeks. We'll see. We'll see how things go. Now, I'm excited because for the first time since we've been doing this morning look at what our legislators are up to, we have news from the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Legislature. The members there have begun to introduce legislation, and now we can begin to talk about this. And we'll start with the House because there's only 2 that have been introduced. The first one is not anything that's, I don't think there's anything really to see here. It's to adopt the rules for the House by Malcolm Omar. Patrick St. Nicholas from Tinian introduced Bill 24-1. And if we go to it, it's to appropriate $11,877 to the mayor of Tinian and Aguiguan. I'm pretty sure I'm butchering that word, and I'm very sorry about that. This is an appropriation that was generated from local revenue for the operations of the mayor of Tinian. Let's see, does it talk about what it will be spent on? No, it doesn't say what the money will be spent on, just that it will be under the auspices of the mayor of Tinian. Now, if we go to the Senate, there have been 9 bills introduced. The first is by Jude Hofschneider. He's from Tinian. And it is about the CNMI pension plan. Let's see. The defined benefit plan has been closed. Majority of the employees have withdrawn from the DB plan since 2013 in order to prevent bankruptcy. Today, the only retirement plan offered by the NMI is a voluntary defined contribution plan, just like government of Guam. The legislature finds that it is necessary to create a new retirement program to be known as the CNMI Term Pension Program for the benefit of those government employees who were prior members of the DBP who voluntarily withdrew to save the CNMI government from bankruptcy. The legislature further recognizes those active government employees who voluntarily withdrew to protect retirees' benefits and the solvency of the fund, lost their right to withdraw the government's employer contributions to keep the DBP afloat. At the time, the employer contributions of 37.39%, wow, that's a great contribution, was a substantial amount and a financial loss to those active government employees that withdrew from that time. The legislature finds that in consideration and in all fairness for those active government employees who sacrificed their future retirement benefits for the continuity of retirement payments, this legislation proposes to create a CNMI term pension plan for employees of all three branches of the government. In addition to employee contributions and budget allocations, additional funds can be collected and deposited into the plan from the CNMI's government to collect deficient employer contributions for all employers, including all government, public corporations, and autonomous agencies. Okay. It was a very interesting legislation by Jude Hofschneider. And I'm curious, there are tables here with numbers. I'm just curious. I'm all for, I love pension plans. I mean, just the security in a pension that you have from a pension fund. And I have zero problem with government employees in Guam or the CNMI using taxpayer resources for the contributions into their pension fund so that when they retire, they have some semblance of good security, financial security from their retirement until their death. What I don't know, just by looking at this legislation, is whether the CNMI government can afford it. That's a whole other issue, and it is completely relevant to whether this bill should pass into law, but it would be very interesting to follow this bill. Very interesting indeed. Okay, that's by Jude Hofschneider. The next one is also by Jude Hofschneider, relative to establishing agricultural water usage rates for commercial farmers, ranchers, and livestock producers. I have to imagine this is a bill that would greatly benefit the people of Tinian because of all the agricultural stuff that goes on in Tinian. It's to improve food security by amending a section of the code that to establish agricultural water usage rates for commercial farmers, commercial ranchers, and livestock producers. I see. So basically, this is a reduction in rates for those who... Now, okay, so here's another example of legislation that, on the one hand, sounds great. Yeah. I mean, especially to food manufacturing, especially to food security. It's just that, can the CUC absorb this impact? And are there covenants in place that the CUC has to follow that would make it so that if they did do something like this, would they have to raise rates somewhere else? And if they do have to raise rates somewhere else, would the public appreciate the prioritization of food security and food manufacturing over their personal pocketbook issues because they'll have to pay more in whatever sort of way? I mean, good questions. I'd love to follow this bill as well. This sounds like something very well worth exploring and taking a look at. The next one is by Hofschneider as well. It's to transfer management and supervision of soil and water conservation districts to NMC-CREES. I don't know what that is. Let's look at it. Yeah, when it comes to CNMI legislation, I will be not as versed in it because I'm not as versed in the functions of the CNMI government as I am with the government of Guam, but we can learn together, and in the comments, you can help to educate me. The legislature finds that the CNMI experiencing drought conditions. Oh, I didn't know that. Drought conditions will only continue to worsen due to ongoing dry weather conditions. Legislature finds that the current severe drought conditions in the Marianas, coupled with CNMI's amplified efforts to increase food security, with local produce and livestock requires a major collaboration. While DLNR has been instrumental in the development of our soil, DLNR lacks the expertise and the funds necessary to expand and further develop the districts for agriculture. The legislature finds that Northern Marianas College's Cooperative Research Extension and Education Services, also known as NMC CREES, has also been instrumental in providing technical assistance to Saipantinian and Rhoda soil and conservation districts. More assistance is required and more funding is necessary to ramp up the assistance to the soil and water conservation districts. This is basically a transfer of functions from a line agency over to what Jude Hofschneider is, I think rightfully calls the experts in this area, NMC. Oh, Jude Hofschneider's on a roll here. All right. I'm not sure if I'm all that interested in following that bill. Definitely his first two bills I'm interested in looking at. By Manny Castro is the next one. Bill number 5. It's to establish a fire reserve corps. Let's see. Within DFEMS, that's Department of Fire and Emergency Medical Services. And the CPA Aircraft Rescue and Firefighting, that's the ARF unit. Let's see. It does exactly what the title says. It establishes reserve units within these areas to augment the existing human resources there. Does it say anything about money? I mean, you have to pay these people. Compensation. Reservists may be compensated during times of declared disasters by the U.S. or CNMI government when performing official duties, and at any time should funding be made available through federal grants or through local appropriations. Okay, so what this bill does is it authorizes the development of a corps. I don't know, I'm not sure, maybe one of you can educate me whether legislation is needed to authorize the startup of a reserve corps unit. But where this legislation is lacking is in a funding source to pay for this compensation, right? I don't see it. Yeah, I don't see anything about a funding source. Maybe that's one of the things that senators will scrutinize as they go through this. Not a bad idea, though. But also, I'm not interested in it enough to follow it. Bill number 6 by Manny Castro is to authorize DOC to pay inmates and establish work programs. You know, this caught a lot of flack when he introduced it in the House last year, but I don't think it's a bad idea at all. Except, of course, for the question that I'm asking of each of this, where's the money going to come from? But putting inmates to work and having them make money for the work that they do is not a bad idea. It will lead to rehabilitative outcomes, which is good because most of these people are not going to be in prison forever. They're going to need to get out of prison and then, you know, have they been rehabilitated? And work inside the prison while they make money is a good way to help to rehabilitate people. Yeah, I don't think there's really a need to go through this bill. It's sort of self-explanatory. I mean, the devil's in the detail, right? And the legislature will go through that, but you get the general idea. Number 7, also by Manny Castro, to establish a police reserve unit within DPS. That's the same as the fire thing, so we'll skip that. Manny Castro, again, bill number 8, to amend the CNMI Recycling Act of 1999. Let's see what this says. The original law was enacted to establish a long-term disposal capacity for the CNMI. The original law established an advanced disposal fee program for specific materials. The legislature finds that it would be appropriate to amend certain sections of the Act to grant DPW the authority to carry out the advanced disposal fee program. They didn't have that authority already. As the agency whose purview includes solid waste, it has a better understanding of the management Okay. There is hereby established within, oh, I see. It's taking this from the Division of Environmental Quality to DPW to promulgate rules for the advanced disposal fees. Okay. In evaluating the benefit of diverting various materials, okay, transfers. This is basically a transfer of functions from DEQ to DPW. But the bill doesn't really say why that's exactly necessary. It doesn't say whether DEQ has failed or it's just a better function over at DPW. It also places the expenditure authority of the advanced disposal fee funds under DPW in consultation with the Director of Solid Waste Management. Okay, well, that was easy enough. And the last bill is by Selena Babalta. This is her captive insurance bill. She introduced it in the last legislature. The Senate president in the last legislature refused to let this go anywhere. So captive insurance is not the easiest thing to explain, and I would imagine that this is the same bill as the last one. This is an exhaustive, this is an exhaustive piece of legislation. Essentially, so Guam has a limited captive insurance industry statute and authorization. This statute, or this proposed statute by Senator Selena Babalta, is what do you call it? Sorry, I saw a comment that really pissed me off and it made me lose my train of thought. This proposed statute by Senator Selena Babalta. So you have these companies, right? They have a lot of money, and it costs money to insure things, especially when you're a big company. So instead of purchasing insurance, they set aside a fantastic amount of money as self-insurance. For example, if Guam had a better captive insurance program, a huge company like Cortec International, which has its capital financing arm, construction arm, hotel operations arm, affordable housing arm, I mean, it's just this gigantic conglomerate. If Cortec was allowed to set aside $100 million in any bank here, and that $100 million was free from government, taxation, regulation, etc., meaning it was protected, and it was able to grow interest in a bank account. They would park it away as insurance for, the next typhoon that will damage the windows in all those hotels and all their affordable housing units, or litigation liability, whenever Cortec gets sued and they have to have a pot of money for whatever, right? So they have, it's this insurance that they have, captive insurance, or, so that's a local example, right, of how that could work. How that would work in the CNMI is Cortec, because the CNMI would have a better captive insurance statute than Guam, would park that $100 million in a bank in Saipan. And what happens when a bank parks a whole ton of cash? It's able to give out more loans. Its portfolio increases. And that's how you finance internal economic development. The banking system is extremely important. And any deposit of a significant amount of capital in a local bank means a whole lot for the community. Or your rich conglomerates, your Samsungs and whatever, Sonys and from Korea and Japan could see, or even from Taiwan, Hong Kong, I don't know if mainland China would be a candidate as well, but you have these rich companies who want the stability. I don't know if that's even the case anymore, come to think of it, but the stability of the American economy and financial system. and all the checks and balances that are in play, and the watchdog of the SEC and FinCEN and all that stuff, if you have a captive insurance statute, it's conceivable that those big companies would park self-insurance monies into your bank, paying fees, et cetera, et cetera. So this Selena Babauta bill is an economic development opportunity for the CNMI. Now, will it actually, there are doubts to whether this will actually work, to whether a big company like Cortec or a big company like Samsung would actually participate in the captive insurance, or whether what you're going to see is what you saw in Guam happen, was the loophole that was created, that the captive insurance statute created, allowed for local insurance companies to become captives and to therefore not pay certain taxes. It was a big deal back in the last administration, talking about how certain industries don't pay any taxes at all, and it's because of these loopholes. Sometimes it's because of these loopholes in the law, and so stand by. I read something this morning from someone I know, someone who is my friend, and it hurt me, and so okay. All right. Yes, Dave Lebowski says, thank you for supporting the medical malpractice reforms. I have always supported the medical malpractice reforms. I am quite disappointed in our legislators that after all these years, nothing has been done. I know, Dave, that you have been very supportive of Senator Therese Terlahi. I am not as supportive, considering, and when you consider this medical malpractice initiative, why didn't that bill pass? And when amendments needed to be made so that it could pass, why wasn't that done? Why hasn't the legislation been introduced now? And it isn't just Therese Terlahi, it's really all of them. Sensible legislation to give access to those who are not rich to the medical accountability protocols of this government. Dave, I will always support this reform. Not just because you're my friend, and not just because it is the right thing to do, but because of your son. I think anyone who doesn't support medical malpractice reform in one shape or another, meaningful reform, has turned their back on your son and his memory, which would be disgusting. The turning back on a 5-year-old child who should be alive today, if not for neglect on the hands of the government. So yeah, Dave, yes, I'll always support medical malpractice reform. And as much as possible, I'll push it in this legislature. Just like I'll push anything that I know to be as true and right, even if that offends people. And I will thoroughly enjoy blocking the bigots, blocking people who are crying Bloody Mary about their right to free speech and the narrative and doing the research. You know what I love most when I think about these people and all of their complaints? Is how they've basically developed their own support group. And the irony in that these people have zero mercy for people needing mental health therapy. Now they have to create their own support groups to support their mental health. For Kandit News, I'm Troy Torres. You all have a wonderful day. I will, in about an hour, bring you an interview with the chairman of the Guam Chamber of Commerce, Teo. It was a very interesting discussion about poverty, taxes, education, the hospital. There was just so much that we discussed, and I think you'll really enjoy this conversation that I had with the chairman of the Guam Chamber of Commerce. For Kandit News, I'm Troy Torres. You all have a wonderful day. God bless you, and I love you all.